So I am proud and honored to invite to the platform Jonathan Holloway. The title of his capstone is Investing in Resource and Industry. Warm welcome.
Good morning. Just going to move this out of the way, if that's okay. My name is Jonathan Holloway. I'm a fifth-generation funeral director and a manager with Harana McConaty Funeral Home in Denver. And I want to talk to you today about the reason that we are all sitting in this room. Whether we're doing our capstone presentation and graduating, whether we're just getting into the program and starting the journey, or if we've been in the industry a while and are current leaders and owners of our organizations. The most important thing, and I tell families this all the time as I meet with them during a funeral, is that it's about the team that's around you. You can't do it by yourself. That same idea is true for our organizations. The employees around us are what lead to our success. It takes commitment, determination, and communication. Before we dive too far in, though, I want to tell a story. This story takes place in 1976 in a small garage in Los Altos, California. Many of you may recognize the main characters of this story as Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, of course, the creators of Apple Computer. But the story is not about them. The story is about the 5 individuals who were also in that garage, which most people don't even know existed. The 5 people that were also there in that garage were drug addicts. They were on LSD just before they started, also with the help of Steve Jobs. They were college dropouts. There was a 14-year-old, and most of them had probably never even seen a computer chip before. But these 5 individuals with Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, the 7 of them came together for a common goal. They believed at that time that they could put a personal computer in the home of every person in the world. And not only could they do that, but they could also make sure that that device was flawless. It was ahead of its time, and ultimately it was a beautiful product that they believed in, and so did their customers. Ultimately, they succeeded in this goal in many ways. The Apple I and the Apple II computers, the first and second generations, were revolutionary. Over the next decade, Apple experienced exponential growth. Unfortunately, with growth comes growing pains, as many of us know. It ultimately resulted in a number of different CEOs. It resulted in many of these 5 original employees who were hungry and driven by a specific goal. It resulted in them either being let go, going into different industries, and also resulted in 1985 with the dismissal of Steve Jobs from his own company. Steve Jobs, obviously taken back, he went off on his own and created another computer company. He also created Pixar, of course, with everyone's favorite Toy Story. His computer company, though, Next Computers, was ultimately acquired in 1995 by Apple Computers and resulted in him back at his alma mater, if you will. At this time, they had gone through a number of different CEOs. Apple was hemorrhaging money, and something had to change. Steve Jobs came in and he said, "Put me back at the helm." Steve Jobs took control of the company once again, and they realized that they needed to go back to their roots, back to the garage in Los Altos, California, of what made them so successful. They realized that without the employees around them, without the determination and the passion, they couldn't do it. By this point, they needed a turnaround, and Steve Jobs helped to do that. They put together an advertising campaign that in 1997 talked about what they believed in, again, the fundamentals of Apple Computer, of a flawless product in the home of every user. But the commercial and the campaign that they created also talked about the belief behind those around them. It talked about the rebels and the misfits from those LSD addicts and the college dropouts. It talked about the square pegs and the round holes. And so while this commercial was directed mainly at the consumers, it reflected the ideas and beliefs behind the employees, behind the product. And that commercial went a little something like this.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
One of the things about this campaign that a lot of people don't know is that this was not the original commercial that aired on TV. There were two versions of that were created. The first, which was this version, was narrated by Steve Jobs himself. What Steve Jobs said, though, is that we need to redo this commercial. And it was redone by a professional voiceover because Steve Jobs said, "It's not about me. Although I just came back to this company, it's not about me." And so, while this version has come out in recent years, this version never aired on TV. So the question is, what does all this have to do with funeral industry? There's a couple of conditions that have to exist in order to have successful teams, development, and making sure that what we're investing our time, energy, and resource in is worthwhile. And so I want to walk through three of those conditions today. The first is that we have to engage hungry employees. There was a study done a number of years ago by the Harvard Business Review, and they interviewed 1,200 of the nation's top managers. And in this group of individuals, the top managers, the average age was 30 years old. Many of the ages that are sitting in this room today. They had elite degrees from top universities. And they maybe just recently came into the workforce. What the Harvard Business Review found was that 95% of these individuals were engaging actively in networking opportunities. Those opportunities included sending out resumes, sending out applications for different positions, and exploring what their opportunities are, what their value is to either their industry or their profession. The astonishing fact of this, though, is that this article also found that of those 1,200 top managers, the average tenure at their position was 28 months. A little over 2 years. Congratulations. You just got your license in your state. You've only got a year left before you go find another job. We have a responsibility as leaders to make sure that we're engaging our employees, giving them the opportunities to succeed and to continue to find their own path. I remember when I received the call to come to the Leadership Academy. I was at a Catholic church in Denver on a funeral, and Darren Forbes, our COO, called and said, we'd like to have you a part of this program. And I remember feeling perfect. This is exactly what I was looking for. An opportunity to continue to develop my skills, but be engaged. There was a study also done by Gallup that said that 69% of employees don't feel engaged in their jobs. Engaged employees lead to loyal employees. Loyal employees lead to less turnover. And that's something that I think all of us experience. Some of us may be the opposite of can't have turnover to get a new taste of things, but it is something that is very important in retaining our talent. The second condition that needs to exist, and something that, again, was also realized in the story of Apple, in that the goals of the organization have to align with the goals of the individual. But at the same time, it also matters the other way around too. The goals of the individual have to align with the organization. We spend a lot of time and energy recruiting and making sure that Sally Joe is the right fit for Smith Funeral Home. We need to make sure that we protect the goals. Goals have passion and they have dreams and things that we believe in. Those 5 individuals in the garage for Apple, they believed in what they could do. And ultimately, that's what resulted in their success. When we get involved with those around us and, again, the alignment of goals, we focus on where we're going, the future. We plan ahead. At Harana McConaty, there's 4 kind of overarching vision statements, if you will, and it's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And I want to start with number 4, coming back to number 1. Number 4 is to reduce cost. Number 3 is to increase revenue. We're a business. We have to make money. And the more money we can make, the more we can reinvest and make sure that we're serving more families in the way we want to do so. The second is making a difference in the lives of the families we serve. You may think, why is that not number 1? We're all funeral directors. We all want to serve families. At Harana McConaty, though, we have a belief that the number 1 reason we come to work every day is to make a difference in the lives of those we serve with, our colleagues. As leaders, we have an obligation to do that with our colleagues, our peers, but also those that report to us. When everyone's goals align, you have better communication, better collaboration, and ultimately better leadership. But it's something that has to start from the top and work its way down from there. The last piece, again, we've talked about the hungry employees that we need to develop, giving them the opportunities to succeed. We've also talked about the alignment of goals. And the third thing is, though, and this is where it relates a little bit more to probably the people in this room, is that there has to be a return. There has to be a reason to do it. When it comes to leadership development and employee development as a whole, it's tough to quantify that return. But let's think about return for just a minute. You're thinking about buying a new coach. A new coach is $100,000. With cremation on the rise, it's only going to take you about 75 years to pay that off. That's return. And we have to make sure that what we're spending our resources on is something that can help and will experience that return. Again, as I mentioned, it's hard to quantify that when it comes to training and employee development. I think about my experience, again, with Harana McConaty. About 4 years ago, I was in mortuary school in Denver, and I was talking to our program director, and She said, you should just go talk to John Horan. I said, I know John. My family is a selected firm, and John has always been a wonderful influence throughout the industry. And so I said, okay. I remember sitting in his office about 2 weeks later, and at that time with a beard, and we were talking about the industry, the changes and where we're going, the experiences that we all see on a day-to-day basis. And by the end of it, I was working for him. I had no intention. At that time, I was going to go to mortuary school for a year, and I was going to go home to the family business, and I was going to work there, and it was going to be great, and it was all set. Well, I'll put a wrench in things, and it was a good wrench. I've had an opportunity at Horan & McConaty to see things that I would have never seen on a level and volume that would have never experienced, to see some things that I could learn from, to see some things that I would do differently, but to take those things back to my family's firm. When I sat down with John, I started working part-time and going on services. When I finished school, I ended up coming on full-time with Horan & McConaty, and they said, well, obviously you want to go back to your family. How long do you expect to be here? And I said, well, about 1.5 years, 2 years. Again, that was 4 years ago. And I've had a great opportunity since then. Again, at this time, I'm a location manager. But even that timeline that I gave Horan & McConaty, 1.5 years to 2 years, they said, I would rather have an A player for 1 year than a C player for 5. And I thought, what an influence. That kind of vision and investment in those around us. Here I am, a kid who John Horan doesn't know anything about, and they're willing to invest in me. I mentioned the story of Darren Forbes calling about this program, and I was even more astonished. I thought, I've only got about another 6 months left, and they're going to pay for a 2-year program. Perfect. And it was something that I realized that it's not just an investment in what we are as a funeral home and what we do, but it's an investment in the industry. The skills that I learned here and through Horan & McConaty and the money that they've spent and the resource, the time, the energy, it's all something that I can take back to my family's firm when that time comes. It's something that every single one of us can continue to build and collaborate through selected and through industry associations. Not only do we have a responsibility to those we serve with and the families we serve, but to the industry as a whole. We all know that when an article comes through CNN that talks about the latest funeral home that's burying a body out back and returning cement to families in an urn, that reflects on all of us. And so we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard. The only way to do that is to make sure that we're developing each other. Internally, externally through the community and through the industry. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, whether it's coaching, mentoring, whether it's succession planning. I begged my father for a long time. I don't care if I'm the next generation of Holloway Funeral Home, just make sure you have a plan in place. There's an experience, and actually John Horan shared this with me as well. If you ever have the chance, ask him about his experience. John was, not to go into too many details, but John was in line for he was president and CEO at 28 of a 2,200 call firm, and was swept out from underneath of him on a weekend through the death of a loved one. Succession planning. It's something that we think, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. John Horan thought the same thing. And it wasn't something that John did, but it was an experience that he had where everything, the carpet was just ripped out. So if you have the chance, ask him about it. It's a great story. But for me, it was through that development of just having the conversation with my parents, ensuring the viability of the funeral home. Whether it is the next generation of a funeral director or whether it's just protecting the employees around you. And so these are just 3 conditions, though, that have to exist for effective development. We spend so much time, and it takes a lot of energy to spend time with our employees. Colby, you gave me a piece of information that has really affected me throughout my leadership journey and something that I think can help every single person in this room. It's simple. Be present and let them know you care. That's all it takes to be a good leader. If you can do that, you'll have a team around you that will give you the exponential success that's been experienced in Apple and so many organizations throughout the world. Before I conclude, I do want to just thank a few people, including John Horan, Darren Forbes, and Jennifer McBride, our owners through Horan and McConaty. And they have been such a resource for me and willing to invest their time and energy in me. And I also want to thank, obviously, my classmates for all that you've done and supported me through. But also want to thank my parents, my dad and my mom, who have been great role models in the funeral industry, but also in leadership development and kind of my journey. And then finally, Marguerite, the selected staff, thank you for this opportunity. The leadership development program and the academy is a unique thing. It takes a lot of time and energy, and it means something to every single person in this room. We get different things out of it. For me, it's been a wonderful journey, and we'll continue to learn. And that's where we'll go from here. So thank you.